Locked On Phillies. On today's episode, I'll give you my perfect blueprint for the Philadelphia Phillies 2022-23 offseason. We'll break it down on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phillies baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are indeed free and available wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on the Odyssey app. Wherever you consume your content, Locked On Phillies is there. And once again, if you didn't catch my most recent episode, I want to say thank you to everyone who stuck with us throughout the entirety of the 2022 season and that playoff run. Absolutely remarkable run by the Phillies. Couldn't have done the coverage without you hanging on to every word, checking out every video, listening to every podcast. So really appreciate the continued support. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, review on YouTube, like it, and leave a review wherever you consume your podcast. Give me some comments on YouTube. A lot of Astros fans have been commenting recently in the wake of the series. Some of my comments about the leaning into to pitches and everything. Listen, we love healthy disagreement. I still appreciate you checking everything out. So thank you very much for listening. And we'll continue to have good dialogue about this past season and what is to happen this offseason. Now, there's a couple steps to the blueprint for the Philadelphia Phillies offseason. The first step is knowing what you're losing and what's coming off the books to give you an idea of the cap space. And not that there's cap space, but when I say cap space, because obviously it's a no salary cap league for the Major League Baseball trade agreement, the MLBPA, the labor agreement that they went through. It's still no cap, nothing like that. You have the luxury tax, which is kind of like a soft cap, but we know how this works. You can spend as much money as you'd like, just the more you spend, the more penalties that an owner will incur on what they're spending via the tax. All that to say, again, what I just said, you can spend as much as you want, but the more money you reduce, the more likely it is that an owner is going to spend more money to bring in more players. And for the Phillies, who have been at one of the top payrolls in baseball for a couple years now, they're going to continue to be that way thanks to the commitment to winning by John Middleton and just frankly the market of Philadelphia and you being a great Philadelphia Phillies fan and having a great fan base behind this team. So without further ado, here are the players that are coming off the books for the Philadelphia Phillies heading into this offseason and the amount of money that you are saving by them moving on from the team, at least right now, because some of these players could be re-signed. We will talk about that later in the episode. As it stands right now, though, here are the Phillies players off the books. First off, Jean Segura, $14 million, no longer part of the payroll. The Phillies did not decide to exercise the option on Jean Segura. Now, does this mean he's gone? More likely than not, yes. We will discuss that further. Again, these guys can be re-signed, but $14 million off the books because Jean Segura, the option was not picked up. Didi Gregorius, already gone from the team, but that's $13.6 million that will not be on the payroll next season. Brad Hand, $6 million, no longer on the payroll. Juris Familia, been off the team for a while now, but $6 million coming off the payroll for him. Corey Knebel, $10 million coming off of the payroll. Zach Eflin, $5.7 million off. Now, that's one of the prime candidates, Zach Eflin is, for the Philadelphia Phillies to potentially re-sign. We know how they feel about him. They like him in the back end of the rotation or the bullpen, which is what it was for the past month or so of the season for 2022. We'll see how the Phillies handle that. Kyle Gibson's money is coming off at $9.3 million. Odubel Herrera, no longer with the team, but still $1.9 million. That'll be no longer on the payroll. And the last, Johan Camargo, $1.4 million also coming off. So just doing some quick math here, 2, 3.5 plus 9, 12.5, 5, 17.5, 27.5, 28, 34, 40, 53.5, another 14 million on top of that. So probably about $68, $69 million coming off the payroll for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, how that money will be used, there's a lot of thought about that. And John Middleton's plan and Dave Dombrowski's plan as the president of baseball operations, Sam Fold as the GM. It'll be interesting to see how they employ that money and how much they give back to some of those players via re-sign, how many go to free agents, how much hangs around in case they want to make a trade to take on more salary. Not sure, but we're going to start by, now that we know that those are the guys gone, and I'll give you the names one more time so the numbers don't back it up. Gene Segura, Didi Gregorius already gone. Brad Hand, George Familia already gone. Corey Knebel, Zach Eflin, Kyle Gibson, Odubel Herrera, Johan Camargo. All names no longer with this team. Some of those we knew already. Some of those are new as of the end of the season. But that is the update on who's going to be gone or who already is gone from the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, of those guys, who would I potentially re-sign? We're going to start with re-signs, the guys you already have in-house that the Phillies haven't already picked up an option on. By the way, they picked up Aaron Nola's $14 million option, so he will be back. I mean, at that price, love it. So Aaron Nola will be back via his contract option. Rhys Hoskins will be back via arbitration. Just not sure what he's getting paid yet. So that's more money that will be taking out of that $69 million approximately, because Hoskins is going to make more via arbitration than what he made this year. Regardless of what you think about him defensively or at the dish, more on Rhys Hoskins later. But of those guys currently listed that I would re-sign if I'm the Philadelphia Phillies, I'm looking at Zach Eflin, and he's a potential re-sign depending on what his market is. He's had injury issues, but when he's been available, he's been a high ceiling type guy. Not consistently good to the level of like a top 3 starting pitcher in a rotation, but he'll have games where he'll look like he can be one of those top 3 guys. Does that entice one of the mid-level teams to go out and throw some money at him to come be a 3rd or 2nd starter for them and take a flyer on Zach Eflin? Possibly. If not, though, and he's still sitting there as free agency winds down, I could see the Phillies trying to bring him back on a similar contract to what he was earning. Again, that would be $5.7 million is what he banked this previous season. So I don't think they'll get him for that, but he's a guy that if he's available at the right price, I can see them bringing him back. Didi Gregorius obviously gone. Familia gone already. Odubel Herrera never come back, gone. Johan Camargo, I doubt that he'd be re-signed, even though he was a nice piece for them at points in May and June. I don't see the spot for him on this team. Kyle Gibson absolutely imploded down the stretch this year. Had one nice appearance in the playoffs, but his $9.3 million way too costly. He will not be back with this team. I'd be super surprised if they did anything to bring him back in. Same to say with Corey Knebel, who had the late injury but was largely disappointing in the closer role that you brought him in for. Brad Hand, not going to be back. Not good enough. Not terrible, but had some really rough points of the season. Wasn't consistent enough. That leaves 2 guys. So Eflin, I already talked to you about what he could potentially be. If his market's low enough, I could see the Phillies bringing him back to either be a long reliever or a back-end starter. And here's the guy, Gene Segura. Now it's interesting because on his Instagram, Gene Segura already posted a thank you Philadelphia message, and it seems like he's preparing to be gone. And he's a guy that should fetch interest, the shortstop, second base, whatever you want to call him, the middle infield market. Here's where it gets interesting, though, and we're going to talk about these guys coming up. The shortstop class, the Trea Turner, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Correa class. Some high-ticket names, some really, really talented guys right there. Gene Segura is good, but sometimes when you see a market where you have those top guys, a lot of money gets thrown their way, and the teams sell out for one of those top players, and guys like Gene Segura might get lost in the shuffle a little bit. Conversely, if those 3 all get paid a really big amount, Gene Segura could say, hey, I know I'm not worth that, but that's the shortstop market. Clearly, I'm worth more than what I was making last year with Philly, and he could do that. Or the other option, he could take a hometown discount, come to the Phillies and say, listen, I tested the market. It's not quite where I thought it was going to be. Give me less and I'll come back because I love playing for this city. And I don't doubt for a second Gene Segura loves playing for this city. So The two that could potentially be re-signed off of that list that I'd kick the tires on are Zach Eflin and Gene Segura at the right price if their market's low enough. If they both get what they deserve, they feel they deserve, and I think they'll command on the open market, they're both going to be gone as well. But something to look at when it comes to options for the Philadelphia Phillies from players that they've already had on the roster and could potentially re-sign through free agency. Now, coming up next, I'm going to discuss the second part. So the first part is re-sign. The new part, well, it's acquisitions, which is trades and free agents. We're going to break this down a lot more over the next couple months. We're going to do our free agent spotlights again, like we did this past offseason, all of that good stuff. But an overview coming up on the next segment of Locked On Phillies, where you guessed it, we're going to look at the shortstop market. And we're also going to discuss a little bit of starting pitching and maybe even an interesting trade. That coming up next on Locked On Phillies. First, though, you know I've got to tell you about my good friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline, you've heard me talk about them thousands of times throughout the season. And that's because betonline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every single professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer to esports, everything. They've got it all at BetOnline. It's betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, well, you can find those on BetOnline as well. We're always the fast and easiest way to get your betting fix. And if you head to the website today, use mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. You can find just some great options for Thursday night football coming up, the Eagles Monday night game coming up against Washington, big NFL slate, NBA in full swing. College basketball just got going again. The NHL's cooking. Get over there now so you can maximize what you can do over the course of these next upcoming seasons. Bet online. It's where the game starts. All right, let's talk shortstops, because with Gene Segura leaving and now the opportunity to shift Bryson Stott over to second base, and I think he could play shortstop at the major league level, but if one of these other names comes in here, well, Stott will shift over, much in favor of either Trea Turner, Dansby Swanson, or Carlos Correa. So I'm going to start by ranking the talent level of those three players, and then I'll tell you which one I'd want the most, and then I'll tell you which one's the most likely. And the funny thing is, a little bit of a spoiler, I think the top one might be the same for all three of those answers. Let's start with skill level. When I look at this shortstop market, the first guy I look at is Trea Turner. He's a five-tool player. 21 home runs this year, can hit for power. 300 average over his career, average guy. Not average, hits for average guy. He's anything but average. Incredible speed, incredible fielding, can field the position really well. A good guy, ties to Philadelphia. That's not important in this part. We're just talking skill. But to me, Trea Turner is the most skilled of these shortstops on the market. The next, it might sound crazy to go with someone other than Carlos Correa, but I think I might have to go Dansby Swanson next. And part of that is projecting a little bit. I think Dansby Swanson has only started to scratch the surface of what he can be defensively as a shortstop in Major League Baseball. And I think his ceiling is higher than Carlos Correa. I think Correa is a proven guy, more so than Swanson, but something about the demeanor Swanson plays with, the clutchness he has. I know Correa's had big hits and huge moments for the Astros during their World Series run back in 2017. I get all that. What I'm saying is projecting out a little bit over the next couple seasons. If I'm giving a big contract to someone, it's Turner 1, it's Swanson 2, it's Correa 3. And that's no knock on any of these players because they're all super talented. And I'd be really happy with any of them in Phillies red pinstripes. Maybe I'm being a little biased because we've seen more of Dansby Swanson, right? Because he's in the division. We see him with Atlanta all the time. Guy drives us crazy when we play him. And he made a big jump defensively this past year. He was a really good piece for them, showing a little bit more of the power as he grows into his just everyday major league career. He's hitting his prime. Correa, a little bit further along in his career, so a little bit less interested in giving him a big long-term contract like Dansby Swanson and Trea Turner are going to be looking for. So, yeah, that's my ranking for skill level. Now, the next one I said, the ability to sign them. It's funny because Trea Turner's market is going to be the highest. But that being said, there are ties to Philadelphia. He's played with Kyle Schwarber. He's really good friends with Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper earlier this year called him his favorite player in baseball. There's definitely something going on there. And Bryce Harper, of course, crossed over with him during his time in Washington. So you're looking at it and you say, there's the connections. There have been the comments. You look at the betting odds, and Philadelphia is 5-1 favorites 5-2 favorites via our friends over at Bet Online to sign Trea Turner. The best odds of anyone, not the Dodgers. And the Dodgers are still in the equation. They could always throw the bag at him, even though they have a huge payroll already. Interesting to see what they'll do this offseason with their disheartening playoff performance after winning over 100 games again. We'll see. But Trea Turner, the ability to sign him, you're going to have to shell out the money, which is going to lead to our next discussion about a potential trade and freeing up even more cap space. And I shouldn't say cap space, more so salary to be spent, because, again, you can spend as much as you want. But realistically, everyone has a limit. So you want to create more room to sign these guys, and we'll talk about a trade coming up to do that. He may be the most expensive, but the connections are there. So interesting. Swanson, probably the second most likely as well, because I don't think the Phillies are interested in Correa, partially because of, like I was saying before, you don't want to throw a big contract at a guy that's older than the other two options. Correa would be a really good option if Turner goes back to LA and Dansby Swanson goes back to Atlanta or goes somewhere else and gets the bag from someone else. If Carlos Correa is a Philadelphia Philly, I'm stoked. I'm very, very excited about that. But again, the better ability to sign them, it seems like they'd be more willing to give Swanson a long-term contract than Correa. And also on top of that, where I said Turner would be a little bit more expensive than the other two, Swanson is probably going to be the cheapest annual value between these two, because Correa is using the Minnesota Twins and what they paid him is kind of a benchmark. Dansby Swanson hasn't gotten that huge contract yet. So we'll see how that works out there. Now, here's what I think will happen. I think Trea Turner is going to be a Philadelphia Philly. I really do. I think the connection is too tight to just write off. And I think they're going to go all in to get him. And I look at what Dave Dombrowski did this past offseason. We talked at length about, is it Kyle Schwarber? Is it Nick Castellanos? Is it neither? And I was firmly in the camp the whole time of, hey, I'd prefer Castellanos. I'd take Schwarber. I think there's a solid chance that they get both. And they ended up getting both, which shows how committed that John Middleton is to shelling out the win and how aggressive Dave Dombrowski is to go out and make deals happen. When they set their sights on a guy, I believe they're going to get him, and Trea Turner's that guy this offseason. So, hey, we'll see. I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket because you will have a hefty market going after him. But, yeah, Trea Turner is the most likely. The second most likely, I talked about likely to pay. I don't think Dansby Swanson is the second most likely, even though I think he's the second most skilled and would be the second best fit as far as signability. I don't know. I think that when Trea Turner comes off the board, and hopefully it's to the Phillies, a lot of people are going to go overpay on Dansby Swanson. I think Correa would be the more evenly valued of the three players. So that's what it is. Turner, Swanson, Correa is my wish list. And Swanson and Correa are kind of interchangeable down there at the bottom with some nuance about age and contract length and size and everything like that. Now, how do you create the space for a Trea Turner? Well, that brings me to the trade. Yeah, Rhys Hoskins might be going. And there have long been talks about this. Do you move Rhys Hoskins before you get him his final year, the deal out of the way? Because he has arbitration. This is his final arbitration year. Then he's a free agent after 2023. People have already had complaints about the way he plays first base, his streakiness at the dish. I think he's still a very, very good player and going to command a lot of money when he hits free agency in 2023. Not just because he's a Scott Boras client, but because he'll earn it. If he's with the Philadelphia Phillies next year, I'm happy with that. But if it comes down to, hey, you got to move some salary to get Trea Turner in here, Hoskins will be the point tried to move. And I think you could really benefit from moving Rhys Hoskins for a solid starting pitcher. There's some other conversation about Carlos Rodon, who has been linked to the Phillies by Jim Salisbury, who does a great job with reporting to see if that's where they want to go in the starting pitcher market, free agent wise. But if they want to go via trade, Rhys Hoskins moved for a starting pitcher. Maybe it's a 4 or a 5 guy that you trust more. Now, he deserves to command more than that, but it's 1 year, and the question about the signability will be out there. What I would do is I would trade Hoskins for starting pitching, middle of the rotation starting pitching, clear up that space for Trea Turner, bring him in. I know what you're saying. Connor, then who plays first base? Well, we'll discuss that next. That's the final part of the plan. Call-ups, additions, and a little bit of altercations, we'll call it, as we wrap up today's Locked On Phillies. All right, so what are the did I say altercations? I meant alterations. I forget which one I said. Hopefully I said that right. But here's what I mean. So right now, in my dream plan, we've got Trea Turner playing shortstop. We got Bryson Stott at second base. And then we have a hole at first base. Who plays over there? And I've seen some tweets already today. I'll move Kyle Schwarber there. Schwarber's not good at his natural position. I don't want him playing first base. Ideally, Schwarber's going to DH for this team next year because Bryce Harper can play right field at some point. You can shift Nick Castellanos to left. You'll have Brandon Marsh to lock down center field, and that's great. So your ideal outfield would be Castellanos in left, Marsh in center, Harper in right. Schwarber then DHs second base Stott, shortstop Trea Turner if you can go get him. Your starting pitcher Wheeler, your catcher obviously JT Realmuto. And notice how I haven't gone over to third base to talk about Alec Bohm yet. Here's something that I think would be interesting. Alec Bohm showed that he can be a good defender, an average defender at third base. I know it seems crazy to be like, okay, he just settled in at third base, change his position, but could he be worse than Rhys Hoskins at first base? I don't think he could be worse. And does he give you enough offensively at the first base position? Maybe if you build a good enough lineup around him. So I'm shifting Alec Bohm to first base potentially. And then there's a whole third. Who goes there? If Jean Segura can be re-signed for a hometown discount, if his market isn't quite there because of the high level of shortstops available, I would love to see Jean Segura play third base for this team next year on a hometown discount. Again, I'll say it. I'm not saying shell out for Jean Segura. If he makes good money, he deserves to go make it elsewhere. We're going to miss him sorely the second he signs with another team. We know for sure that he's not coming back, but that would be my ideal infield. Jean Segura at third, Trea Turner at short, Bryson Stott at second, Alec Bohm over at first. My ideal, somewhat realistic infield. There's other guys I'd rather have play first base that are not available or that the Phillies aren't going to pay for. But may sound crazy. That kind of seems to be what fits to me. And then maybe you add a Carlos Rodon through free agency. It'd be hard to get both him and Turner. We'll see who they trade for with the Rhys Hoskins trade. And maybe it's someone we didn't expect available that you can slot into the third spot behind Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. And then how does the rest of the rotation fill out? Well, Ranger Suarez will be back. You really trust him. He'll be in your 3 spot, depending on who that trade is for Rhys Hoskins, if that does happen. Again, all of these hypotheticals. And then who's your 5 spot? Well, 2 names potentially. Griff McGarry and Andrew Painter. Both of those guys, I do believe, will make their major league debuts in 2023. Griff McGarry ahead of Andrew Painter, but I believe Andrew Painter is going to be significantly better than Griff McGarry. And I'm not going out on a limb there. Andrew Painter's incredible. He's coming, guys. And if he's here and that's your rotation, Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, unnamed pitcher because of a trade, or even if they don't make that trade and Rhys Hoskins plays first and Alec Bohm plays third and no Jean Segura, well then Griff McGarry, Andrew Painter at the back end. Let's get nuts. I'll go to battle with that team any day. So that is my blueprint for the Philadelphia Phillies offseason. There's some other minutia in there. Add another 2 or 3 veteran relievers that you trust a little bit more than those guys you're letting go, the Knables, the Hands, Familia from earlier this year, stuff like that going on. So figure out what you want to do there to supplement the bullpen. But there you have it, folks. Connor Thomas's blueprint to the Philadelphia Phillies offseason in a nutshell. We're going to break all of this down significantly more over the coming months as we draw closer and closer to decisions being made and spring training and the roster takes shape and we know who gets the invites. But just from a 1,000-foot overview, that's how I'd handle it. We'll see how close I am to what Dave Dombrowski and the front office actually does. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. And then make your second listen. Locked On Sports Today. They're awesome. The biggest news in sports. The Sixers had a big win over the Phoenix Suns, who are the top team in the Western Conference right now last night. That might be on there. There's some big stuff going on with college basketball returning. The NHL's playing. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. The Eagles are 8-0. NFL's still in full swing. Check out Locked On Sports Today for your biggest news happening in the world of sports as it happens. And they're available on Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts, and YouTube. So check them out. Thanks as always for joining me on Locked On Phillies. And I will talk to you again, same time, same place tomorrow.